kindergarten families. I'm Mrs. Arnone, and I know there's been lots of questions about how to support your student with writing, especially in these early stages of kindergarten when they might not even know how to write their name on their own. How do we expect them to write full sentences or even begin to write a story? So I'm going to give you a little crash course on how to support your student for writing. So there's many different stages that your child might be in. So I'm going to show you a variety of different phases that your child might be in so that you can decide how to support them at that given stage. So when kindergartners start writing, what we would expect them to do is in this first stage, they would tell a story using a picture. So in this example, maybe the sentence is something like, I like my dog. So this student would have drawn a picture, and then the next step that they'll do is they'll use beginning letter sounds to label their picture. So you'll see in the photo that I have a dog drawn, and then a letter D to represent the dog, a letter T to represent the tail, and then I have a letter A to represent the little boy's name. So this would be the very first stage that your child might be in, and this is okay. If your child is struggling to write their name still, if they cannot write a sentence independently, if they don't know many letter names and letter sounds, this would be the great first place to start. I know in Edgenuity, there are workbooks for you to complete with writing prompts. If the writing prompt was something like, tell what is under the bridge, then you would have your child complete on a separate piece of paper a picture and then have them draw the picture, label the picture. I know there's also a section for them to write the sentence. What you can do is you can scribe for them. Scribe means that you're going to write down whatever they tell you to say. That way they're recognizing whatever they say is represented in words with letters. So in this example, I would write down for the child, I like my dog. Then what they could do are two things. They could use a highlighter and they could trace over the letters. That way they're getting the fine motor action of writing and they're able to have that experience. They could also trace down below and rewrite the sentence. So that would be another option. You could do this on the workbook. If you choose to do a picture as their writing example, what you would just do in addition to submitting their workbook page is just snap a picture of this and submit that with their Edgenuity work for us, okay? Teachers know that this is considered writing. So please don't feel discouraged if this is where your child is at. We'll understand that you're supporting them at their level. So this is the very first stage along with scribing, tracing, and then copying the sentence. That would be totally okay. What you want to try to avoid though is constantly giving them the sentence and scribing for them. They need to have the experience of labeling and doing those beginning letter sounds so that they're getting the practice of stretching sounds out, stretching words out, and identifying letter names and sounds. So I'm going to give you another strategy to help with that in the next example. This would be the next example for what your child would be expected to do. So you can see in the picture, there are a few more letters. So in this example, we're using beginning letter names and ending letter names. So this is going to help support your child in recognizing more sounds and words. This is what they should be doing independently. So this is different from scribing their sentence. They're going to be doing this on their own. So you'll notice I have beginning and ending sounds for the dog. I have beginning and ending sounds for the tail of the dog. And then by the little boy, I have a full name. Since their name should be one of their first things that they're able to write, I do have the whole name spelled. Then in the sentence, I have beginning and ending letter sounds for each of the words. So I wrote, I like my dog. You might notice that in the word my, it's not spelled correctly as you would typically write it as an adult, M-Y, because your child's only stretching out words phonetically. Phonetically means they're only listening for the sounds that they hear in the words. And since they know letter Y says yeah, they won't know yet to identify the Y in the word my. When they hear it, they hear I. So they're going to write down only what they hear. And even though this might be frustrating for adults to see words spelled incorrectly, this is the stage that they'll need to be in developmentally, and we'll move on to correct spelling down the road. So I do want to give you some strategies for stretching out words. So there's a few different things that you can help your child do to stretch out words and then to begin spelling them and writing them. So something they can do is called stretching. And I want you to tell your child to imagine they have a long rubber band as their tongue. And they're going to stretch that rubber band long and slow so that they can hear all the sounds and words. So I'm going to stretch out the word dog so you can hear it. Ready? Dog. Then after they've stretched out that word long and slow, you're going to use your fingers to tap it. When you tap it, you're isolating each individual sound in the word. It would go like this. D, ah, g. Then they can go back and they can identify each individual sound that they tapped out. That way when they start stretching, they might not know middle sounds yet, but if you were working on beginning and ending, they would go d, ah, g, and then come back to this finger and say d. Well, when I touched this, I said d. What letter says d? And that's how they'll begin identifying letter sounds to begin writing words. So then they would write down the D, and we'll skip that little middle letter for now, and then they would move on to that ending sound g. And they'll then write the G for the g sound. That's how they would begin writing words, like in this sentence. After they've mastered that and they're able to do beginning letter sounds and ending letter sounds, the next stage they might be in would look like this. So this way, they're beginning to identify those middle sounds in addition to the beginning and ending. They're still spelling phonetically though, so they're only writing down what they can hear. So in this example, I have I like my dog. And even though like we know as adults would have an E on it, we're only going to write down what we hear. And since you can't hear that E helping that I say its name, we're not going to write that yet. What you'll also need to begin doing with your child is making sure from the very get-go, from that very first example that they're beginning to write the sentence, that they're using something called finger spaces. So that would mean that they recognize that each word has its own separate set of letters, so it needs to be in its own space. So we need to use spaces in between to represent the different words. So something you might do is have your child put their finger in between each word, and we call these finger spaces. Another important tip is to have them begin from the very get-go, writing with capital at the beginning and lowercase letters throughout. What this is going to do is prevent those really hard habits that are hard to break. So if your child is really great at only capital letters, please encourage them to use capital and lowercase because those are very challenging habits to break once they get used to writing with capital letters throughout their sentence. You also want to encourage them to use ending punctuation. This gets a little challenging when they begin writing multiple sentences because sometimes students have a hard time recognizing when one sentence starts and when one sentence ends. So they might need a little extra support with that. Recognize that this goal, I would say, is typically what we would expect from students around Christmas time, beginning with ending second semester into third semester. This is what we would hope to see. So then I have another example. This would be the next stage. So this would be what they would be moving to next. And you'll notice that now I have these words spelled correctly. And this is because we're really going to begin working on those sight words or high frequency words. These are just the common words that are spelled and read most often. So they'll begin recognizing words like this as they're reading as well. So I have like and my spelled correctly at this point. Like I said, this would be kind of what we would expect to see your child doing moving into between Christmas and New Year's time. This would be the next stage. But recognize that if your child's already here, that's fine. Support them at that stage. If your child is still at this stage, that's fine too. Every child works differently, learns differently, and has their different developmental stages. It's just going to be important for you to recognize where to meet your child and how to support them at that stage. So in this one, like I said, we had high frequency words spelled correctly, and we're still continuing to identify each sound in the words. So this would be the next step. And this would be more of the end goal that we would expect at kindergarten. So in kindergarten at the end of the year, typically students can write a story with a beginning sentence, a couple sentences in the middle of the story, and then a closing sentence. So essentially a full paragraph is what we would expect students to write. Typically in my class at the end of the year, students write multiple pages at a time, and it would be easy at that point, even if everything's not spelled correctly, but for adults to be able to look at it and be able to at least get the gist of what they're trying to say because they have most of their phonetic sounds. So this would be the last stage, and you'll notice that I do have more details added because as they get more fluent in their writing, they should be able to add a little bit more and push their stamina. So this is the next stage. I wrote, I like my dog, he can run fast, we like to play fetch. At this point as well, they were going to begin to add, these are called blends and digraphs. So 2 letters that make one sound, like PL in play says pull, and they'll recognize that it won't just say pull, it'll say pull. They'll also be able to recognize that digraphs, that means 2 consonants that come together that make a different sound, like CH says ch. They'll be able to recognize those and have those skills at this point. Please know that your child will get here eventually, and it just takes lots and lots of practice. Just like when they begin reading, it's going to be a little challenging at first. When they begin math, it's going to be a little challenging. But we have to start at the beginning, and the beginning might not look like a lot, but this is what kindergarten teachers will be expecting. So, like I said, different ways that you can support your child are scribing. They can trace, or they can then copy what you say, but always have them try to do some of the work as well so that they're able to recognize those phonetic sounds and words, and they're able to associate letter names and sounds with words. You'll also need to encourage those finger spaces, like I said. The biggest tip I have for you, though, is please practice letter names and sounds. So if your child doesn't know yet that the letter A says A and the letter B says B, those are going to be the very, very first steps you need to begin practicing. So some of the ways that you can do that are you can take sticky notes and you can label all around the house. So on the window, put a W, on the door, put a D, and then they're getting that everyday practice in their real life. Something else that you can do is you can really encourage your child to use proper handwriting. So for example, if I have these letters in this sentence, please make sure that they're printed the way that we would typically expect students to print letters. So I'm gonna grab a marker really quickly. And if I were going to write this as an adult and as a teacher, I would need to make sure that my letters were formed correctly. So I'm gonna look at this word dog. And if I was writing this as an adult and as a teacher, I would take my D and circle around, come up to the top and pull back down. That would be the correct way to form a D. If your child is circling and picking up and then pulling back down, please encourage them to use proper handwriting, because that's going to be another hard habit to break once they build those relationships with letters. So please encourage them to use proper handwriting. I'll try to attach a link with some really great handwriting tips and resources for you parents so you can get some good ideas on how to practice those with your child. A good way to practice handwriting is trying to make it fun. So they can roll out long snakes with Play-Doh, and they can form letters with long snakes of Play-Doh. Something else you can do is you can use shaving cream on your kitchen table, put a little blob of shaving cream, have them smush it all around, and then use their finger to write in that shaving cream. That's a really fun way to practice handwriting. Another great way to practice handwriting is to sprinkle salt or sugar or even coffee grounds on a large cookie sheet, and then have them use their finger to trace in those that tactile material, so they can have a really great experience practicing handwriting. One thing children might have a hard time with is that fine motor strength. So if you need to, provide lots of opportunities to play with Legos, to use kitchen tongs to pick up little cotton balls. You can also just encourage them to play lots of activities where they need to do this motion. So anything where they're maybe like dressing a little doll or playing with action figures where they're holding on to things, that's going to build these muscles, which will really help their fine motor strength when they're holding pencils and crayons. I hope those are helpful tips for parents. I'll try to take photos of these and put them in the video at the end so that you can have them as a resource as well. But I hope that's helpful, and please continue to guide your child at the level that they're at. Thanks, guys.